It totally worked. How can you not like that?
Oh, it totally worked.
I'm surprised none of you guys mentioned Shamrock from WrestleMania 14.
No. Oh, we didn't mention the chair shot.
Oh. DDP being stalker.
That was a good
worst.
No, it's not.
It was a good. It would have been good if they.
Nah, I totally disagree.
There's no way it would have been good.
I spread notes to that's the worst.
Recording?
And it's like totally quiet now.
Yeah. That's all right.
That's what we like to call iron.
Need anything else? Pictures or anything? Group?
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. We want to hear from you for our Submission Round 5 Q&A. Send in your questions in video form, please. Please include your first name and location with your question. I don't care if it's on a webcam or you email the file. However you get it, upload it to YouTube or whatever, make it a response. Let's see your face for our next Q&A. That's coming up soon. And to my left, which is your right, Will Brooks joining our panel, and we are moving on to the best and worst swerves. We're going to start with the worst first and get the negativity out of the way as we usually do. Now for the swerves that I know you've all been waiting for. I want to specify firsthand what a swerve actually is, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to say heel turns or babyface turns. Not quite the same thing. For instance, Alex Riley or Virgil turning on their masters, Miz and $1 Million Man, they didn't go in setting up their masters and putting them in a situation where they're going to trick them. They just turned because they had enough. What we're talking about is some situation where someone is obviously set up. Someone, maybe over the course of months or whatever, lured into some situation, and then the truth is revealed. So let's see what you think didn't work. Some examples of the worst swerves in wrestling, Will Vampiro.
Well, mine actually have to do with Bret Hart, and I love Bret Hart to death, and I know this wasn't his fault. But the NWO 2000 was one of the worst swerves ever because it just
Why?
came. The whole storyline with the Outsiders coming in, screwing Goldberg. I didn't understand it. Why Bret Hart would just like join the NWO or start the group or not even spray paint the belt. Nothing. It had nothing to do with NWO. It's like the Outsiders just like said, "Hey, Bret, come with us."
Well,
and he said yes.
The thing is, Russo, when he came into WCW, actually had a goal in mind, reforming the NWO with these 4 people, and it wasn't going to be the same as it was before. They had the World, US, and Tag belts, and they were going to be like the new Horsemen sort of thing of just this small group of elite guys. And if you watch the angles back with Goldberg and Sid and whatever, building up to that with those 4 individuals over the course of the next couple months, it actually did kind of make sense in retrospect. What I didn't like about it, though, and this is Bret Hart, who had flirted with the NWO many times over the course of the past couple of years, and none of them made sense. No. Hogan was jerking him around in every direction. Heel face, heel face. It was just ridiculous. This NWO, what I didn't like about it, however, is why Bret Hart? Yeah. Bret Hart had just come back from his brother dying. Earlier in the year, he took some time off, and he had so much goodwill coming back with those series of matches with Benoit. I mean, he who we do not speak of. People were really into Bret Hart and getting him really sympathy heat, but whatever, it worked. And Bret Hart was finally put in the main event of WCW, which Russo did, that no one else did. Yep. And then all of a sudden, bam, he's a heel. That's what I didn't really like about it.
Him as a heel just doesn't make sense. Even
in '97 it did, but it wasn't the same
but
thing.
Not
even in the '80s when the Hart Foundation made sense.
Mason Ryan's return to Raw. I know you don't watch Raw on a daily basis. Vicky Guerrero.
I just don't see why it's up there with Goldberg and the higher power.
Well, we're talking about the worst possible.
He's bringing up a recent story.
Yeah,
it keeps it more
relevant.
recent.
We don't have to talk about things that happened 20 years ago.
We don't talk about your shirt right now, but you know. He's going to hit me.
Hit him.
I'm going to Kevin Steen you. But Mason Ryan comes, Vicky Guerrero goes in the back to get a 3rd member to her new stable, Dolph Ziggler and Jack Swagger. She comes out with the returning, jacked up Mason Ryan. She went in the back to go find him. He gets in the ring and he turns on Ziggler and Swagger for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It was just poorly done for no particular reason, which makes it the worst. He might not be relevant, but it sucked.
Well, what makes it the worst to me would be failing, epic fail, on a bigger scale. For instance, Austin at Invasion 2001. Obviously, we're trying to recreate Hogan's heel turn at Bash at the Beach, and it didn't quite work, not only because it was dumb to turn Austin heel in the first place, which I think they found out the hard way eventually, but the Monday before, what was the whole angle? Austin's in a bar, and I don't want to join, and then he shows up driving his pickup or whatever to the arena and beating up the whole WCW. Only to what?
Join the week later.
Right. It didn't make sense at all, especially at the end of the match when he had already been wrestling the other team anyway.
Vince McMahon being the higher power. And
Yeah,
there was, first off, it was not shock whatsoever because there was no one else who could have pinned that guy.
Well, the internet had their ideas of Brother Love and Ted DiBiase and all these
Jake
other
Snake.
nonsense, Jake the Snake, but didn't quite turn out that way at all, did it?
It's me, Austin.
It was
It's
me all along, Austin.
Wow. Even as like a 12 or 13-year-old, I forget how old I was. Like that was not a surprise. I knew it was you the whole
12 years
time.
old.
Forget the surprise part of it. What about the part where just several months before this, he was getting stalked by The Undertaker and the Ministry, and he lit the teddy bear on fire, and he's stalking Stephanie at the house? Oh, it was all a swerve
And
just
how
to
he-
set up Austin.
And how he was leading up the Union, which was Shamrock, Mankind, Big Show, and
Test.
Yeah. Like you just were fighting him like 2 weeks ago.
Wolfpack.
Well, obviously, by now, I'm sure some people watching this have already put in their comment about Goldberg turning in 2000 at Bash at the Beach. And I think a lot of it, and it's the same trap that TNA's been falling in ever since, is overhyping something and failing to deliver. Again, like Austin, no one wanted Goldberg to turn heel, but we see, not only in WCW then under Russo, but even before that with Bischoff, the idea was, well, let's just do it just to do it because people won't expect it. And we saw how wonderful that worked out with Matt Hardy turning heel instead of Christian at Rumble the other year. Just to swerve the people is a ridiculous idea. And Goldberg turning heel, that was not the thing that was going to turn wrestling on its ear either.
Kurt Hennig leaving the Four Horsemen to join the NWO.
I thought that was
That
pretty
was one of
awesome.
the
I thought that was
Best.
awful.
Why?
How can that be awful?
Because it didn't make any sense.
Why did it make sense?
First off, you had all this skin sympathy, like you were saying, how you had like Arn Anderson here, take my
Retiring,
spot.
right.
We're being real right now, take my spot. And Kurt Hennig even said, I can't say no to you. Then a week later, just to screw them?
It wasn't
Yeah,
a week later,
it's
but
a swerve.
Why did Hennig need to go to NWO? Did it
Because
help him?
That's
he
what the
brought
NWO was all about.
the
Did he
NWO
go anywhere?
needed Kurt Hennig. Kurt Hennig is the only true real wrestler of that NWO. There was not really that many that could put on a match. He gave credibility to that group as far as wrestling.
The
you know,
NWO were
wrestling.
bullies. They didn't need
lifted-
technical wrestlers.
he
They were
lifted-
bullies.
He lifted
That was
Paul
the whole
Wright up
stick, that they were
perfectly
bullies.
and gave him a perfect plex. That was like one of the coolest moments of NWO is when he did that. So
I don't think that would be the coolest.
No,
moment. It was
dude,
a cool moment.
The
but-
NWO were bullies. They didn't need technical wrestlers. That's what WCW was fighting them was. WCW was technical wrestlers fighting the
calm
bullies.
down. All right?
Here's
You're
what I
upset.
think the problem is. Much like everything else in NWO, it went nowhere. Now, the moment where he smashed Flair's head in the cage when they were ransoming, like Nash had everyone tied up, surrender,
Yeah.
or we're going to destroy
Yeah.
Flair, and he would do not speak of, spit in his face, just defiant. It was great, and then they smashed Flair. Flair came back a couple months later to get revenge and didn't
Never
really
got
have a
it.
big blow-off
No.
either. And I think if it had actually gone somewhere, it would have had a better payoff.
Tell your piece.
The reason that worked is because the Horsemen, Arn Anderson, it was all about tradition. Kurt Hennig is full of tradition. Like you said, a wrestler's wrestler. NWO was against everything that stood for. That's why them stealing the tradition from the Horsemen, from Kurt Hennig, taking that guy, that's what made it cool.
I think you just like kind of proved my point. Actually,
I think I moved into the Twilight Zone where Brett's explaining a
That's
WCW
how-
angle and why it was good. But one of the worst ones outside of WCW was during the summer of '96 on Raw. You may remember Jim Ross cut this work shoot promo about being fired because of his Bell's palsy in his face and everything, and he'd been promising for a couple weeks that Razor and Diesel were coming in. Now, of course, as fans flipping back and forth that night, you turn on Nitro, and the first thing is like the outsiders. You're like, all right, we knew it was a fake wrestler, isn't it? And then sure enough, it was. That was pretty bad. But back to WCW itself, when Buff Bagwell came back in his first appearance in Georgia, his home state, with the neck brace and a wheelchair after he broke his neck against Rick Steiner on that Thunder and almost died in the hospital, actually. He had such sympathy that night. He could have been a huge babyface. Look what happened with Austin when he broke his neck and came back.
Yeah.
And what did they do? They had ended up having him swerve Rick Steiner,
Yeah.
which went nowhere. And I don't know if that's the worst ever, but all I'll say for something new, Nash texted himself. Let's move on to some of the best swerves when we come back. Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. I'm sure you've got a lot to share for your thoughts and opinions on the best and worst swerves, and you can do that if you call 347-857-4647 on Wrestling Roundtable Radio, Tuesdays at 11 p.m., blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable, simulcast on Go Fight Live. And you can get the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt at the Wrestling Roundtable store, along with our Amazon store at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Joining the panel, Rodney LeConte.
Who?
To my left, which is your right. Rejoining us, Rodney, and we are going to talk about the best swerves this time. Stuff that really worked. Stuff that made you go, holy shit, I guess. What are some of your ideas for the best swerves?
When Paul Bearer turned on The Undertaker with Mankind, and for
Boiler
Paul
room
Bearer,
match.
the Boiler Room match. He had to-
SummerSlam 96.
He had to grab the urn, and The Undertaker was in there, and he reached out, and Paul Bearer went, you know what? Nah. And then Mankind came in, and that was really the first time you saw something like that happen with The Undertaker and Paul Bearer, and that was a really cool moment.
Survivor Series, 1994, and watching Owen Hart beg and plead to his own
Yes.
mother and father to help throw the towel in. One of the best moments in wrestling.
That
Just-
is like the ultimate scummiest
That
thing
is
I
the
could
I
ever
know.
worst
did.
thing.
That was great. That put Owen, solidified him as
Owen
like one of the
Hart.
greatest heels.
Whoever came up with that, I don't know who did.
Owen
And it
probably
wasn't-
did.
and it
The
wasn't
year that those two had, Owen and Brett.
Whoever came up with that and said, Stu and Helen, do this, was a great idea. You gotta love the family involvement because that's really what it really was a key. Mother and father having their son getting tortured in the ring,
And the competitor
and
that
the-
Stu is, we're
yeah.
not throwing the towel.
Yeah, and Stu with it, but as Owen pleaded to his own mother, and the mother threw in the towel, and Owen's like, "I fooled you." Hot Pettingill's back there. It's like one of the scummiest moments in
And he
wrestling.
ran
But
off.
that was a great swerve.
And it wasn't even to
And-
get himself the title.
No, it wasn't. It was.
It was just wanted off Brett.
Imagine doing that to your own brother or sister, like
Mm-hmm.
screwing them out of a match or a championship, like tripping them while they're running. It's like, come on, man.
Speaking of brother and sister, Shane and Stephanie McMahon have been involved in lots of swerves.
Yep.
But the first one I thought was the best one. Also at the one with The Rock and the recreation of Montreal that everyone loved but me, apparently. But earlier in the tournament at Survivor Series, the Deadly Games tournament, Shane McMahon in the match with Mankind in Austin.
Yeah.
Shane had been built up the past couple months. He was a commentator on Heat first. That's how he was introduced. And then he was kind of rebelling against his father. And then all of a sudden, when he's going to make the count, no. And that great
No.
shot of Austin, like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
That was really good. And I have to give him that.
And
There
Vince-
was just
Vince-
also a lot of great swerves because McMahon, who we thought was hurt, came out of the wheelchair
Yes,
that same night,
that's
and
exactly
then
what I was
Rock,
about to bring up.
and it was just all culminated to that one night. Probably one of the only moments in the invasion that I enjoyed was that Raw when the ECW guys turned on Jericho and Kane.
Yeah.
When Van Dam, and we all know the story, Van Dam and
Tommy
Tommy
Dreamer.
Dreamer, they came from the crowd and no one knew what was going on, but even Bubba Ray Dudley was dropping hints throughout the night, and then Paul Heyman's like starts screaming, and it was just such a great moment, and definitely one of the best.
The funny thing about that is, I believe...
And then they ruined it an hour later.
well, maybe. But that could be
Not
the worst.
even.
All in one night. But I believe Paul Heyman was revealed to be the mole there that they had been hinting about for a couple months. There was a mole who's letting the alliance in the building and that sort of stuff. I think that's what it was. And I didn't even get at first, like everyone else did, that all the mid-carders who ran in, Taz, the Dudleys, Just Incredible, whoever, obvious ECW guys, right?
You
I didn't
get
even
it.
think about that because my mind was so blown about
felt
Van
the
Dam
same
and
way.
Dreamer being there.
I felt the exact same way because I thought it's like, well, why are these WWE guys in the
Yeah,
ring?
but
And
listen,
someone who
well,
didn't
Paul
watch
Heyman-
ECW, then
Okay.
I realized.
Yeah, when they turned
But then
around,
I understood
you're
it.
like, oh.
Why-
Yeah,
You ain't
you're just like,
shit.
whoa! I think the crowd in Atlanta knew at the same time. They
Yeah.
all started like, wow, really?
Yeah.
This really happened?
They just did that. Yeah.
They just did that.
As far as the NWO goes, we could talk about so many great NWO swerves. I want to mention at least two because there's some that people know about, obvious ones like Hogan, the
Yeah.
big one that we should be talking about,
Right.
but we've talked about that enough. One of the ones I wanted to mention was Ted DiBiase. Coming on Nitro, his debut, when he came down the stands and he looked at the camera and he said,
5.
next week, 5. Of course, we all know what he was hinting at. And then the next week comes, oh no, it wasn't the Horseman. Not only him, but the Giant joined the NWO
Yeah.
all in one night.
Yeah.
Great complete swerve. I didn't see it coming whatsoever. But also Scott Steiner. When he joined the NWO, it was Super Brawl 98. And he was perfectly in position in the stance with the
Yeah.
dog face gremlin. He usually did it. And then brings down the double axe handle. I thought that was really cool.
When they were teasing to bring back D-Generation X and then Triple H gave him a
Which
pedigree.
time?
2002.
2002
Okay, the first
version.
time.
I really thought it was going to happen. Everyone's always talked about a rebirth of that group.
Keep in mind, that was a couple weeks after they killed the NWO.
Yes,
Yeah.
because he's hinting all night. Here, I'll get you a T-shirt. He's like, you don't see it because you don't see the DX shirt. And all of a sudden, the music hits. You're ready to suck it, and then bam, nailed him with a pedigree, and that's it. That was the end of the segment.
Somebody setting up somebody for the Ultimate Destruction involves the Ultimate Warrior and Jake the Snake Roberts. When the Ultimate Warrior was feuding with the Undertaker, Jake the Snake basically goes, look, if there's anybody that knows about this guy, that knows about the dark side, it's me. I'm going to teach you how to beat this guy.
And those
He
weird
locked
storylines,
him in a
all these vignettes.
casket. He
Buried
was
him.
scratching. He buried him. He put him in a room full of snakes.
And that's when the Viper struck.
Right. And then Jake said, you know what? Sucker. Took his liberties out on the Warrior.
Yeah.
And he wound up being with the Undertaker. That was one of my... Especially as a kid, it was so real.
Yeah.
Ultimate Warrior's clawing. He was gasping for breath in the casket.
It was so real with all those cameramen there not doing anything. And I'm just kidding. But I mean, what was really good about it, to not joke around,
The
but,
fact that we were 8.
well, when he turned heel, what was his reasoning? Never trust a snake.
Never trust a snake.
And then his deal with us was
Trust me.
Trust me.
Yeah. Darkest theme to his.
Which one
It's
on
on
the
my
bigger,
iPod.
better thing?
Great. Another NWO one was when everyone thought that DDP was going to join the NWO. They came out with the shirts.
That
He
was
threw
good.
up the diamond sign, went to slap Hall, and then pulled it, boom, right into the diamond cutter. His old buddies who they
Right.
thought they were going to rejoin. And
Yeah, the Diamond
wow.
stable
The
from
Diamond
back
stable.
in '92 or
That-
so.
that's
That was
right.
great because DDP was a heel that was getting over as a face because of his finisher and whatever. So of course the outsiders
And he's
come
having
in.
great matches.
This was what, like November, December '96.
96, yeah.
And of course it's like a formality to the National. Oh, he's going to join, sure. And then bam, that reaction off
That
the charts.
really set him off, man. And boy, did his star power skyrocket from there.
Speaking of the NWO, one person, as we talked about the psychological ways NWO got ahead with the t-shirts and everything, one person who didn't understand the power of the t-shirt was Mike Tyson when they turned him at WrestleMania 14. And oh no, he was with Austin the whole time, sure. And he's holding up the Austin 316 shirt like, no, you have to put that on. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work the same way if you're still wearing a DX shirt and everything. Tyson didn't get that.
Tyson's
But
kind of stupid.
that, well, maybe, but that was one of the worst, and that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the initial swerve to set it up, which was him joining DX.
Ripping the shirt
When they,
off,
because
yeah.
of course this is coming off the confrontation that made the news with Austin, and they're
Set
doing
the boom marathon.
right, and they're doing it again with Michaels, the other half of the main event, and then when they get in the ring. And he's about to punch him, bam, the shirt's revealed. I did not see that coming.
No, I didn't either.
And even though obviously WCW beat them to it with the celebrity joining the Rebel group of Dennis Rodman the year before, supposedly they were interested in Tyson. I don't know if Dennis Rodman could quite measure up to that sort of swerve.
Yeah, I didn't see that one make the news.
Well, hopefully we make the news sometime, and we're going to need your help to do that. So join the Wrestling Roundtable at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Join the message board. Shop at our store. Go to our social networking sites of Facebook, Twitter, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, and Go Fight Live. And you'll have many ways to view us, and I hope you stick around, because next time we're going to talk about the best and worst retirements. We're going to do the submission round number 5 in our season finale, along with the Montreal Screwjob. I know you've been waiting for it, so stay tuned for our season finale coming up. So for the panel of Will Brooks, Will Valfides, Brett Midge Simonello, Rodney LeConte, I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com.